But the Israelis didn't try to make any political capital out of them. They published them all. They had them all on public display. They, they didn't try to make it difficult for anyone to see them. Everything was open and so on and so forth. Then the armistice came, the partition of Palestine. All the material, the Qumran area came into the eastern side, which later Jordan took over. No one protested Jordan entering this area and basically annexing it. There was no UN meeting to protest this. The Jordanians annexed it. But the Jordanians didn't care about Dead Sea Scrolls. So there was a wall there, and you couldn't even go past it. And what happened was that the Bedouins started discovering new materials in other caves. And the person who was on the spot to deal with this was a well-known Dominican priest called Father Roland DeBook. And his assistant was a person by the name of Father Milik. He was a Polish priest. Milik was a manuscript man and did all the work for Father DeBook. Father DeBook was a very good, he'd been a diplomat of sorts. He was a very good diplomat, very well positioned. He was the head of the Dominican order in Palestine. I want to keep you a little bit more and then I'll let you go, but I want to get to a handy place to stop here. And he basically set up the Qumran editorial team, which was, if you want to call it, Judenrein. No Jews, obviously. But also, really, not very many Protestants. I don't want to get into the Catholic Protestant squabbles here or anything like that. But the point was that Father DeVoe and Father Milik really looked at everything that came in and made the assignments of documents to people. A lot of people got documents from this official international committee that was formed that they did never finally published, and then passed on to their students and their students' students, and that's where we got into this whole squabble about the scrolls never being published. It took them forever, and then it started to become, they began to realize that it was, they could make academic capital maybe out of it in terms of their prestige and so on. Other reasons, laziness and that. It's all in the literature. But the point is that I think Father DeVoe and Father Milik didn't give any important documents to anyone whom they didn't really have confidence in their interpretation of it. Now this was told to me by a German scholar who since passed away, but who did a lot of the manuscript work for them. And he worked on the team and put manuscripts together. And what happened was, in 1954 or so, or 5, an article appeared in the New Yorker magazine by a writer called Edmund Wilson. And Edmund Wilson, it was on the Dead Sea Scrolls, I think it occurred over a couple of issues, was known as a left-wing communist sympathizer, fellow traveler, who wrote a book called To Finland Station. He was a literary critic. He was a jack of many trades. He liked to dabble in Islamic literature, things like that. He was in the Provincetown set. He knew Eugene O'Neill, people like that. He married a woman called Mary McCarthy, who was a famous woman writer, and so on and so forth. In any case, he was suggesting the scrolls had something to do with Christian origins in Palestine in these articles. And this German scholar told me that that frightened the editorial committee out of their minds. It was at that point that a curtain of secrecy was pulled down over the scrolls. And no one who wasn't trusted was allowed into the inner sanctum. And therefore you got an official interpretation. Because you see, when you got an official edition, it had usually an interpretation attached to it. And the public saw an editio princeps, an official edition by the Qumran publishing team. They assumed these scholars knew what they were talking about. And so the public said, well, they know, we don't know. So they accepted the official position. And that official position was known as the Essene theory. That depends what kind of Essenes you think these are. I accept the Essene theory as such, but that's to determine what I was trying to do as we were coming down to the history, what kind of Essenes these were. One of the scholars on this team, I'll soon finish now, was a person, just bear with me, called John Allegro. And John Allegro was a bit of a maverick from England, even though he has an Italian name, he actually was Protestant. And he was the one who got the copper scroll, which was a really important scroll that was found in Cave 3, just lying on the ground. Took it back to Manchester University where he was teaching and had it cut open in the metallurgy department. But someone had already read it through the backside and knew it was a treasure list. A temple treasure list. The hiding places of the temple treasure. So of course the Essene theory, people said, well, how could Essene, retiring Essenes, contemplative Essenes, be doing anything with temple treasure or hiding anything like that or know anything about that? And in the copper scroll it even had a note that in where another copy or two of this document had been hidden. And these were, so what the official theory was by Millick, who finally got to publish this in the late 60s, was that this was really an imaginary document, maybe a child's exercise document, something like that, that wasn't to be taken seriously. Or maybe some passerby dropped it by accident. Couldn't relate to the Essene community. And anyway, it was imaginary. They did the same with the war scroll. And Allegro, John Allegro, records in his letters that were shown to me by Bajan, who got very friendly with his widow, where he recounts his chagrin at not being able, when he published his book for the paperback series in England about the Dead Sea Scrolls, he was forbidden by DeVoe and Millick to mention the copper scroll and what was in it. And that really sent him over the edge. So he determined, like many of us later, back in the early 50s, to get the scrolls out of the hands of these people. And he had a lot of good contacts with the Jordanian government, being a British scholar and so on. And he was just on the verge of achieving this with the Jordanian monarchy with his contacts in 1967 when the Israelis conquered the Rockefeller Museum and put the scroll team right back in control of the scrolls because they were afraid of problems with Rome. And they didn't want their situation in Jerusalem to be upset by anyone in, let's say, the Vatican or someplace else who might be worried about interference in the editorial process of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which the Israelis had no understanding what the Dead Sea Scrolls were even all about, except they were interesting Hebrew documents. They didn't understand that there was any relationship to Christianity to any extent, or anything like that, or how important they were, or how important was not to be a member of the official theory, and so on and so forth. So we'll stop there, but I will say this, that Cave 4 was found around 1952 or 53, and it was discovered by Bedouin. And DeVoe had been down there with his team, but DeVoe gentlemanly approached archaeology. They would sit under tents, you see pictures of them. I knew DeVoe's cook at the Albright Institute. He had been the cook down there, and he described to me what was going on. I won't say on camera some of the other things he told me, but I would say this, that they let the Bedouins do the work, and somehow they missed K4. Now you can see K4 right from the settlement area. It's right across the ravine. Later on, after they left, the Bedouin cleaned it all out, went up to Jerusalem and sold pieces of it. There was a policy put in place by the official team that you would pay by the square centimeter for materials, because the Bedouin worked in gangs and they would often rip things up and give a piece to everyone in the work gang. So we don't know if the destruction was totally because of the weather and age, or also because of the destruction. I don't think they meant to have the Bedouin rip these things up, but that added to the destruction and so on. In any case, they didn't find it themselves. The Bedouin found it, and they admit that they missed it. How you could miss it is like beyond me. We'll end there. This is what the Dead Sea Scroll deception is about.
About it being about